none of this means that the election doesn't matter. I hope everyone goes out and votes, supports their candidate, feels passionate about this election. Just don't let that passion bleed into your investment decisions. I think that's overall probably making a mistake. Hello everybody, Tom Graff here, Chief Investment Officer at Facet, back again this week to talk about the US election and its potential impact on markets. So look, I've been in this business 25 years. I've seen a whole bunch of presidential elections. So I thought it would be fun this week to kind of get into how do pros think about election risk, and specifically what kinds of things do we see potentially happening or not happening as a result of this election specifically. So let me start with this. At the very most fundamental level, stocks are a function of company profit growth, right? So whether we're talking about the whole stock market, it's going to go up or down based on whether company profits are higher or lower than expected, or a specific company, whether that company's profits are higher or lower than expected. That is at its core what drives the stock market. And so if you take an exogenous event, such as an election, something exogenous just meaning something from the outside, you got to look at its impact through this lens, right? So if you can't tie something that's going on in the election to something like how many pickup trucks is Ford going to sell, or how many rolls of toilet paper Target sells, or how many people go see a Disney movie, if you can't tie it back to something like that, then you got to ask yourself whether it's going to really have a lasting impact on the stock market. Or not. And certainly you got to ask whether you want to make any different decisions about your own portfolio based on that. So that's the lens that I'm going to use when analyzing any potential impact from something like any election, but this election specifically. The next thing I would encourage you to do is be a little cynical, okay? American companies have been through election after election, seen Democrats and Republicans and older candidates, younger candidates. They've seen everything, right? And they've somehow managed to get through it all. And let's not forget that they've got $1 million lawyers and $1 million lobbyists who are all looking out for their interests. These companies kind of know how to maneuver in a way that maybe you or I cannot. Kind of the bottom line is American companies aren't that fragile. Small changes, even fairly large changes, they know how to navigate. Next thing I would say is a good investor knows where he or she has an edge and where they don't, all right? This election's a 50-50 election. Most polls have it extremely close, particularly of the key battleground states. And so, you or I don't know anything that everyone else doesn't know. And if that's true, then it's probably all kind of priced in to the market. And so that's the kind of thing where I would say, look, I don't really have an edge saying that, Trump's going to win or Harris is going to win, and this is what we should do because of it, because I genuinely don't know. Now, as you're thinking about, well, a candidate has proposed this, they proposed that, I think it might have these effects on the economy. Remember, you really want to focus on what they're going to get done, not what they say. Particularly, they're more kind of bombastic rhetoric. Almost no matter what happens with the presidential election, we're going to have a pretty divided government. There's a good chance that the same party that controls the White House doesn't control both houses of Congress. And even if they do, there's been a lot of inter-party squabbles in the last several years that have prevented kind of big things from getting passed in many cases. And so given that, right, we really got to ask ourselves, could this candidate get a really large tax bill through, or could this candidate make massive changes to budget spending? It may be, but it's going to be tricky. And so I'm always thinking about, what might this candidate get done? What might there be some support on both sides of the aisle such that something might actually happen here? And I think that's another important thing to bear in mind. All right, so with all of that, let's get into a few things that could be specifically important about this election. Now, to be sure, there are individual companies that would probably do a little better if Harris wins or if Trump wins, depending on the company we're talking about. I'll just give one example. Before Biden dropped out of the election and Trump was a bit more ahead in the polls, you saw solar companies come under pressure under the theory that maybe Trump would be less friendly to that sector. And so there's probably some other effects we could think of at the individual company level. So if you're picking stocks, individual stocks, you really do need to think about, well, how reliant are they on certain subsidies, certain regulations, that sort of thing, that could change in a different regime. Now, picking stocks isn't my game, so that's not something I'm going to focus on here in this video, but I will say that's something, if you are picking individual stocks, that definitely could matter. You do want to think hard about how much am I relying on kind of government regulation, how much of that's out of my control in picking stocks. It's one reason why I don't love picking stocks in the first place. Now, the broad market really only cares about big economic effects. We have seen some presidents pass some things in recent years that have definitely had a big effect on the broad stock market. Two that come to mind quickly are the big Trump tax cut in 2017 that lowered corporate tax rates, COVID-era stimulus that Biden enacted in 2021. Both of those had very big positive effects on the stock market. Overall, that's kind of the exception, not the norm. A lot of times, the kinds of things the president gets done are more like tweaks in regulation, changes in focus on where spending is going or where it's not going. That just doesn't really move the needle for the whole stock market. Moreover, I would say, even to the extent that one candidate is talking about things that would be beneficial or harmful, like changes in tax law, we still got to go back to what I said earlier and question, well, gee, in a divided government, a divided Congress, how likely it is that they're going to pass such a thing. And that's super, super important to consider. Now, probably one of the best pieces of advice I can give an investor is learn to separate primary effects from secondary and tertiary effects. That doesn't mean we don't analyze secondary and tertiary effects. We absolutely do. They can help you make better decisions by understanding all the details, but not if it's distracting you from the primary effect. And I said at the beginning of this video that the primary driver of stocks is company profit growth, right? And so the main reason why we're relatively optimistic about the stock market over the next few quarters is that the economy is in good shape to keep growing. And when the economy keeps growing, most of the time stocks keep going up. You can look at a prior video we had on recession risk to get into more detail on that. But anyway, that's the primary effect that I'm thinking about. If one candidate or another, again, tweaks regulations, tweaks tax rules, tweaks focus of antitrust, stuff like that, that may matter, but it's not going to make me say, well, I don't want to be invested in stocks, or I do want to be invested in stocks. That's that primary driver that's really got me focused on where I want to invest. And I'm not going to be distracted from that. Now, last, I'll say none of this means that the election doesn't matter. I hope everyone watching this video goes out and votes, supports their candidate, feels passionate about this election, donates to candidates if you want to, whatever you want to do to participate in the system. That's what democracy is all about. Just don't let that passion for what you want to see for this country, your passion as a citizen, bleed into your investment decisions. I think that's overall probably making a mistake. Now, if you like this content, if you have questions about other ways the election could impact markets, go ahead and hit them into the comment section below. I'd be happy to answer comments that I see there personally. I mean, if you like this content, we'll be coming at you about every week with more stuff on the economy, on the markets, on the Fed. So hit that subscribe button and you'll be the first to know when we've got a new video out. And we'd love to see you again.